Welcome to Equipping the Core. An acquisition, we often have to strike a balance between getting gear out quickly and abiding by federal contract regulations. However, in some cases, our command is able to use specific contract vehicles to better meet the speed of need. Joining me today is Jack Cave, the division head for program support. Welcome to the show, Jack.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to come in and really share a little bit about what we know about other transactions. So thank you.
It's going to be very educational, I know, for me and probably for a lot of our listeners. So let's just jump right in. What is an other transaction authority?
Another transaction, by formal definition, is a legal instrument issued by the federal government that is not a contract, cooperative agreement, or grant. And I'll tell you in my plain language thing, it's a plain language, non-FAR-based procurement tool.
Okay.
That allows us to reach out to non-traditional defense contractors and do business with them, knocks down the barriers to entry for them to do business with us, and allows us to leverage commercial research and development funding, which over the last 30 years has increased 3-to-1 over DoD spending. So back in the 70s, early 80s, DoD was still the lead, and we were driving research and development, and we were the preponderance of money out there. In the mid-'80s, that changed over. Unfortunately, inside the government, the acquisition process didn't catch up until about 2015 timeframe, and Congress recognized that, hey, we're missing out on a huge chunk of opportunity here with this commercial research and development funding, and they updated the regulation to what it is today, or the statute to what it is today.
When you say it allows us to work with industry partners that we typically wouldn't work with or have the opportunity to work with, is that more in line with small businesses or startup type companies that are working on innovative technologies?
A little bit of both. Some small business stuff. It's really any organization out there that, one, doesn't want to get into a FAR-based contracting or does not have the processes in place to operate in a FAR-based contracting environment. You know, there are several barriers to entry there. They have to have certified cost and pricing system. They need to be able to work in systems like WAF and other places. And there are a lot of these startup companies, as you point out, and these innovative companies that are out there that do not ever want to operate in that type of an environment. So that's a barrier to entry for them. And in this case, they don't have to have those things, and it allows them for us to put an agreement in place, basically a contract, plain language contract, to do prototype projects or follow-on production efforts. So yes.
Sounds like it would definitely speed up the process. Sometimes.
I'm going to jump in on that one and say, I wanted to say this up front, that's one of the big myths. Everybody thinks that OTs are just faster. I'm going to say up front that it's all about efficiency.
Okay.
It's not about, a product of an efficient process is velocity or speed, right, and faster. So really an OT and the OT environment there is about efficiencies. Unfortunately, our FAR-based contract, while very successful and very good at insulating the government and helping us work inside the defense industrial base, it does lend itself to a more linear, lockstep process. And there are some limitations and interaction between the government and the performing entity in a FAR-based world that you don't have in a OT environment. So again, it's about process efficiency.
So how does the use of an OTA differ from traditional acquisition? You kind of just talked about this, how FAR-based is very linear. We go through the step-by-step process. Can you just talk about that a bit more?
Yeah, generally OTs differ in that they do not have to comply with the federal laws and regulations that procurement contracts and grants and other things have to do. So it takes us out of that environment. They're executed by agreements officers, not contracting officers. Now, In our case, our agreements officers are dual-hatted as contracting officers, but they have a different role and responsibility there, some similar capabilities, but a different role and responsibility. They do require a lot more effort by the program team than a standard FAR-based contract.
Okay.
An OT really requires the program team to have a deep understanding of the market and what the industry will bear out there and what they can bring, who the different players are. Unlike in a FAR-based environment, we have an automated system. We can put things out there. Folks can come and look. They can assess if they want to respond to that or not. In this world, in the OT world, we do not have that type of a mechanism, and it's because of the nature of the agreement. Going with these small startups, these innovative companies that are out there that are just getting on their feet and don't have the business processes in place to do that. That's primarily how it differs. It garners special interest from higher headquarters in Congress.
Yes.
Right? So if you do a traditional FAR-based contract, there's some oversight that goes with that. But if you do the similar thing in another transaction environment, you're likely going to get some additional requests for insight that you wouldn't get the other way. So I would just say there's pluses and minuses with any of these new authorities that are out there.
I know with traditional acquisition, and you just touched on this a little bit, we do RFPs or RFIs when we're requesting request for information or request for proposal. So with the OTA, is it that we're going out and looking at different vendors, or do we request RFPs as well?
Yeah, it's a very similar process to the FAR-based construct. The program team makes that determination, which I think we'll talk about here in a little bit, makes the determination OT is the right tool. They develop a OT framework that they're going to go out with, and then we put out to industry and we request them to give us white papers back.
Okay.
So it's a similar thing. We solicit some input from them. They give it back to us most likely in the form of white papers initially. We can ask them also for a demonstration of a product. They can bring a product to bear and bring it back to us and show us those things. So a similar type of a process, a solicitation, a response, an evaluation by the government of that response, and then a determination on the best vendor or vendors to move forward with, if any, meet the requirement.
Okay. You mentioned earlier that people assume that OTs are making everything go faster, but it's not always the case. But would you say that OTs are accelerating acquisition?
I would say yes. Again, due to that process efficiency piece, there are some timelines associated with a FAR-based procurement that we do not have here in place, and that allows us some freedom of movement and some agility as a program team down there. So I think through those process efficiencies, that allows us to gain velocity and go through there. And also, OTs are more collaborative in nature with the vendor out there than our typical FAR-based contract. There are windows in a FAR-based process where you would not interface or discuss with the vendor. We don't have those moratoriums here inside of an OT-based construct. So it allows that kind of ongoing dialogue throughout and it almost requires that ongoing dialogue throughout the process. In itself, that efficiency speeds things up. So back to your thing about being, quicker, it does move us there. We've actually seen program team not inside a systems command, but we have some external users of a vehicle that we have that, again, we'll talk about here in a few minutes. And they've went from request for a white paper to other transaction agreement award in less than 60 days.
Very fast.
Very fast. Very fast. Now, that's not the average. That's been the exception, not the rule. And it really depends on the readiness of the program team. The government program team can really drive the velocity at what the way these OTs move through. So if they come in prepared, they understand the end result they're trying to achieve, they can dedicate the time to developing the solicitation, evaluating the responses, and making the decision. That can be done in a pretty efficient and expeditious manner.
So let's say that one of our PMs is going through the process and they determine that they want to use an OT. How does that process work for them?
At first, I'm going to say that we advocate that they every PM use a merit-based assessment so that they're able to clearly define the benefit and the intended outcome of the project when they make that determination. So that's what we always challenge them to do first. When they come to us and say, hey, we're looking at using the OT, we start asking the why questions. The why, and how. How is this going to get us a better outcome than a traditional FAR-based or another procurement avenue that's out there? So we start out asking them to use that merit-based assessment. Other things that they have to do is they have to address there's a few elements of the statute that they have to address.
Okay.
One of them, that a non-traditional defense contractor must participate to a significant extent in the proposed prototype project. So that's number one. Or there needs to be all small businesses are non-traditional defense contractors that are executing the prototype contract. And then there's another R that's out there, and that allows for traditional vendors to participate also. They would just have to pay 1/3 of the total cost of the prototype project, has to come from something external to government funds. Or lastly, the senior procurement executive, in this case ASN RDA for the Department of the Navy, would have to make a written determination. So one of those four things must be true to use this OT. So they clear that, they look at this merit-based assessment, and they can clearly articulate what's the benefit of going this other transaction route. Again, we get back to your initial, we get back to, well, I can just do it quicker. Or I don't have to do this. Just because you don't have to do something that's normally done under a FAR-based contract doesn't mean that that isn't a good business practice. Competition,
Yes.
in particular. This authority does not fall under the Competition in Contracting Act.
Okay.
But the best practice is we get competition all the time. That's the best practice for the Marine Corps. As a service, that's the best practice for the Dawn, and that's the best practice from a congressional perspective, that we get maximum amount of competition that's out there. Competition drives a better product at a better price, which is what we're all about here at Systems Command, right? So we push them to really understand, again, the outcome that they're trying to achieve and what is the benefit. How is using this OT vehicle going to allow them to produce that outcome in a more efficient manner?
So that we can get the right and the best gear out to Marines.
That's correct.
Have you ever seen a case where they did the merit-based assessment and went through that, and then they decided, oh, this wouldn't be great for an OT, I should do the regular FAR-based?
Yeah, we've had several program offices that have come in, released the request for white papers, received requests for white papers back, and then made a determination that the other transaction route was not going to produce the outcome that they expected.
Okay.
And then the good thing was they were able to leverage a lot of that upfront work that they did, the market analysis, the building of the solicitation that went out there, the request for white papers, and then what they learned from those white papers to quickly pivot to a FAR-based procurement approach, build the products that are necessary there, and continue in stride with that project. So we've seen a few that have done that. We've also seen a few that came in, laid out their solicitation, put out the request for white paper, received the white papers back, and then made a determination that they needed to adjust what they originally thought the outcome was going to be, and went back and adjusted that their understanding of the outcome and what the market, what industry would bear. And that helped us again there to get a better product out to the warfighter at the best cost that we can provide.
I've also heard the term MTA, or a middle tier acquisition. How does a middle tier acquisition differ from an OT?
Yeah, middle tier acquisition is a pathway and not a tool used within a pathway. Another transaction is agnostic to the different pathways that you use. We have a thing called the Adaptive Acquisition Framework today. That Adaptive Acquisition Framework lays out a number of different pathways that are optimized around a specific domain or product. And they lay out basically phases and milestone events that get you from receipt of a requirement to placing that capability into support, sustainment support. That's a pathway that you go down. a OT can be used to support any of those pathways. It is a tool, a procurement tool that is geared at working with an entity to produce a product or a capability that we need to fill out. So one's a tool and one's a pathway that you go down and describes the phases and the milestone events that you have to do to get from start at requirement to fielding and sustainment of a capability.
Okay. That was helpful.
Yeah. So often, again, those two things get conflated, but two very different things. Also, I'll debunk the rule. And I said I was going to say it up front, and I didn't, but there's I would point all the listeners to the DoD OT guide, other transactions guide, very helpful guide, written in a way that is easy to understand and debunks a lot of those myths. They actually call it myth busting in there, where they lay out some of these myths about, one of them in particular is that MTEAs must use an OT, or that those two things go together. When in fact you can use it that way, but an OT can again be used with any of the adaptive acquisition framework pathways.
So tell us about a bit of the success that we've had with our OTs here at Systems Command and the Marine Corps.
I'm going to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about a consortium other transaction agreement that we've put in place at the command. So other transaction agreements can be executed either as a standalone agreement or under a consortium construct. The standalone agreement would be example of that would be a program office understanding industry, going out to a certain segment of industry and soliciting white papers for a specific product.
Okay.
The example for a consortium agreement would be a consortium is a standing group of folks with a common technology focus areas that they focus on, and a consortium brings those groups together, puts them in place so when a program office would go out, instead of them having to go out and understand exactly who to send it to, they send it out to the consortium, and then the consortium has the members that could cover that area and helps you get greater competition.
Okay, interesting.
So a standalone would be, again, one program office out to a specific industry area there. The consortium is a technology focus area organization and allows you to get greater competition at the least effort to the government. It just allows us to put out. So we put one in place with the consortium management group, both for the C5 consortium, and the C5 consortium is the Consortium for Command, Control, and Communications in Cyberspace, C5 we call it. And it also gives us access to the Consortium for Energy, Environment, and Demilitarization, CEED, C-E-E-D. These consortiums are comprised of over 1,700 vendors, and those are non-traditional, traditional, and academia vendors in specific focus areas, and they allow us to go out, do a request for white papers, and get a broader coverage than we would get if we were doing it as a standalone, where we were just trying to focus on a number of companies that we could go out and find. There may be a company in this consortium that's doing work in a specific area that we don't know about. So it allows us to garner the greatest competition and the greatest exposure that we can get for an OT. So we have one of those in place. And you asked about successes and the things that we've had. We've been able to leverage that consortium OT both internally to the Systems Command and our supported PEOs, and other DoD entities can leverage that also. So we've been able to allow them to come in, quickly develop their solicitation, their request for white paper, put that out, and then get a greater volume of responses than they would have gotten with their limited market research that they were able to conduct. So that's one of the successes. We put that in place. It's a general support tool that we manage here at the SysCom headquarters, and anyone can use it out there. Anybody within the Marine Corps Systems Command, our supported PEOs, or other DoD entities. So we've seen a lot of use of that. Some specific uses for our successes that we've had on there, we have our PM for Marine Corps Cyberspace Operations.
Yes.
They've used the OT agreement to do the Cyber Hunt and Analytics Operations Big Data Platform program. And they were able to, again, do a prototype project. They had a successful prototype project, and one of the benefits of the OT authority that was expanded in 2015 is it also allows, if you have a successful prototype project, it allows you to seamlessly transition to a follow-on production other transaction agreement. And the Big Data Platform Cyber Hunt and Analytic Operations Systems Program Office was able to quickly go out, do a successful prototype project, and then transition to production and buy some production-based quantities to get them up and running a lot faster than they would have been able to do if they were doing it again in a FAR-based environment that's out there. So that's one success. The Nemesis program, they have used a prototype project to effectively assess industry capability early on, to do integration of the carrier and launcher system, and then to demonstrate that in a operationally relevant environment in a pretty rapid or quick time, as you pointed out up front. So they've had some great success there. And then ACV in our supported PEO Land Systems, the ACV program office is utilizing today our other transaction agreement that we have here for our driver training system that they needed to support the ACV capabilities out there. So
Colonel Howe was just telling us about how fast they've been able to get that training system out and how they're about to start training with it.
Yeah. If a program team, as I've said earlier, if a program team comes in prepared and they really understand the outcome that they desire, and they can articulate that outcome and they can dedicate the time, a OT can move forward at a rather rapid pace. So again, we've seen a lot of external users. To date, we have about $775 million worth of funding that's been executed under our consortium OT agreement. We've had users from all four services out there. We've had a significant amount of use from the U.S. Army and various entities across the U.S. Army. We've had a significant amount of use across the Department of the Navy, including our other sister Navy acquisition enterprise organizations that are out there. We have Air Force users, and then we have other entities like the SCO, the Strategic Capabilities Office, has been a significant user of our consortium OT. So it's a very versatile tool that provides access to those 1,700 vendors out there, and the process works pretty quickly. If you don't mind, I'll expand a little bit on the consortium management piece of this. There is another myth out there is that a consortium management organization, they are just a pass-through. And I would say while they do apply a fee to what we do, the consortium manager also provides us great value. In this case that we've just talked about, they maintain that group of 1,700.
That's a lot of vendors
in one place. They maintain them. They help us translate. They take, even though we think we're writing things down in easy to understand terms,
plain language.
A lot of things, we do the typical military or governmentese, right? And they help us do that translation. They also help their consortium members understand what we're saying and communicate back to us. So they provide that, that kind of middleware. I call it the middleware. They translate what we have into something that commercial industry can understand. Those folks that normally, non-traditional defense contracts, normally don't do business with us, they translate that back to them. And then when they get the responses from them, they help turn things that we may not understand from the commercial perspective into something that we understand.
Back to military speak.
That's right.
It's funny because you said SCO earlier, and I immediately thought Squad Common Optic and not the organization SCO.
Yes. Yeah. So they help us do that. And lastly, they then help those businesses, those innovative, a lot of times, as you pointed out, small businesses that don't have the mature business processes in place. They help them do business with us. They help us pay them. So we can pay the consortium management group, and they subsequently can ensure that the vendor gets paid. And I will tell you that the fee that we have been able to negotiate, because the amount of use that that we put through here on the Systems Command Consortium OT agreement, our fee is very, very competitive to what you might, what program management offices might experience when they go and use a FAR-based contract at any of the other DoD agencies back. And I would say we beat 99% of them. So I'll put that out as a shameless advertising plug for our consortium agreement there.
Go Marine Corps.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You mentioned that it can go from prototype into production more seamlessly. So once we go into production, does that mean it becomes a program of record? Or how does that work in our because it's a different process.
That's another one of those myths.
Okay.
An OT is really agnostic to the adaptive acquisition framework pathways, the 6 that are out there. It's agnostic to that, and it's really agnostic to, is it a program of record or is it not, right? It's just a procurement tool. It's a plain language contract that allows us to do business with an entity, a commercial entity that's out there. Not tied down to a specific pathway, or is it a program or record or not. But mostly what we see here at Marine Corps Systems Command is we see it used as part of a program of record. So the program's already a program of record. It has chosen a pathway to go down. One of those pathways, be it the major capability acquisition pathway, the middle tier acquisition pathway, the software pathway, the services pathway. It has chosen one of those. The program team chooses a pathway. They have a validated requirement. They have the funding to procure that requirement. And then they start looking at what is their acquisition approach to do that. And part of that is what type of a contract vehicle am I going to use? Am I going to go FAR-based?
Okay.
Am I going to go other transaction agreement? What am I going to use? So the other transaction agreement is just a tool that's used and can be used in any of them. But we most often, again, see them as part of a program of record. You would do a prototype project out there. You would, upon successful completion of that prototype project, which is written, we document that down, and then we can move into production. Another caveat there is we had to use competitive forces up front to get to that. So if we use competition, we had a successful prototype, then we can do that seamless transition to follow-on production.
Okay. Thank you.
But it's really agnostic to, is it a program of record or not?
Okay. We've talked about our successes a bit, but what about challenges? I'm sure with any new approach, there can be some hurdles.
A lot of unknowns out there in the OT world. The scope of what an OT can be used for is still, we're still trying to understand that. So there hasn't been a lot of bounds put on that. That's a plus and a minus. It's a plus because it allows us an open aperture, allows us to be creative and innovative in our strategies and move forward. And at the same time, it doesn't provide the guidance and direction that we're often accustomed to in the Marine Corps. So that's a plus and a minus. I would say also, associated with that, there's some learning curve. We have a acquisition workforce that's steeped in traditional acquisition and the FAR-based approach, and now we've introduced a tool that is almost completely outside of that. A lot of the same, again, business practices and best practice tenets are in there, but there's really not a lot of structure to it, and it allows a lot of free play. Well, there's some learning curve associated with that. So we see a lot of folks that have a misunderstanding of what an OT is and what it is not. And then similar to FAR-based procurements, there are other things like intellectual property rights.
Yeah.
Those same things that are challenges in a FAR-based environment are similar challenges in a OT environment. How do we deal with government furnished property? That's the same on either side. How do we deal with intellectual property rights? How do we work with the vendor to ensure that up front we're adequately describing what our outcome is and they fully understand that, and then they produce something against that. So a lot of the similar challenges that we see exist. And again, the biggest one I'll say is that learning curve.
Changes can be scary.
That's right.
Yeah.
Changes can be scary. Lastly, I'd also say that, as I mentioned a couple of times previously, using an OT can often get you some interest
Yes.
by higher headquarters or by Congress. If you use an OT, that's something out of the normal, and there's some unique reporting associated with that. Not a lot at this point, but there is some unique reporting, and that goes up through the chain, and that can get you some visibility and some interest that you may not have had if you used another approach. So
To make sure that we're spending taxpayer dollars the way that they should be spent.
we'll make sure we're spending their taxpaying dollars right, and that we're implementing this statute correctly.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I think is a good series of checks and balances out there. Again, we ask those questions here when they come to us to use. We don't ask it to turn a program team away or try and not have them use an OT. We ask them so that they can clearly articulate, again, what's the benefit? How is it going to get us something at a better price? How are we going to ensure that the capability that's out there meets or exceeds what the user needs?
Yeah.
So that's why we ask those. And again, we get some insight and oversight from external when you use it. So
OT, as you were explaining them, it kind of reminds me of a Create Your Own Adventure. One of those books where it can take you wherever you want to go. Well, some places, not all the places.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it to you in our pre-discussion here that I think an OT, if you look at, it's like looking through a camera lens with the blurry edges out there, just at the blurry edges. Well, we don't understand what's out there yet in the blurry edges. We're just starting to see how they can be an advantage to us and all of the applications we can use them on.
It's exciting.
We've recently saw Congress come out in a NDAA and clarify that they could be used for facilities. There was some interest in the past from the Army in their facilities team there to use it, and they've used our OT now successfully for that. And then we've had some interest from MCICOM here in the Marine Corps about using our other transaction consortium agreement that we have here
Some of our
to
installations.
address some of our installations and facilities problems that are out there. So again, a very broad lens, still not clearly in focus out there. So it is an adventure. Yeah.
As we're talking about adventures, I have to bring up force design. And force design in the future fight or in our sites. How are OTAs supporting this effort?
Yeah, I think I mentioned a couple of things earlier.
Yeah.
Nemesis in particular, critical force design capability out there has really leveraged the OT vehicle very successfully. As I outlined a little bit earlier, the big data platform, CyberHunt, big data platform chaos program there has leveraged that. And we've also seen a number of other program offices across the Systems Command. ACV, again, you brought that up with the ACV program office there. They have used that for their driver training system here recently. So we've seen it used across a number of areas.
As we know, industry is critical to the work we do here at Systems Command and getting gear out to the warfighter. With OTAs, how does that impact the relationship with the industry?
Touched on a little bit up front. I think there are several barriers to entry out there in a traditional FAR-based environment that a lot of these more innovative companies out there choose not to enter into a FAR-based environment that are out there. So an OT really knocks those things down. When we can let them do business just like they would in a commercial environment, we often get the benefit of that from both a cost of doing business perspective and also a opening or broadening of the industrial base and bringing more players into that industrial base.
If it's easier, people are more likely to do business.
That's correct. Yeah.
The less hurdles.
Certainly.
You mentioned that some of our sister services have used our consortium and are using OTs as well. Do we ever jointly team on OTs, or would it be two separate OTs?
No, we often use OTs for joint capabilities, just as we would for single standalone capabilities. As a matter of fact, one of our questions when we have an external agency or organization that wants to use our other transaction consortium agreement, we make them answer 3 questions. We make them, and one of those questions is, what's the benefit to the Marine Corps? And we often find that they are working on a capability that is something that directly benefits Marine Corps organizations out there. Sometimes the case is that it's just advancing a specific technology focus area or a specific capability, but we often see that it is a capability that will directly support or be used by Marines. So we do have a lot of collaborative joint use of our other transaction agreements out there, and they do lend themselves to that.
Okay. If there's one takeaway that you could leave for OTs, what would it be?
Yeah, I would say the OT Authority really provides a great tool to do a prototype effort, successfully demonstrate that prototype effort, and then seamlessly transition to production.
Okay.
So I would say that's one of the biggest takeaways that a program team can know. If they truly understand that outcome, can define success for their prototype project, and then understand the production quantities and distribution of the quantities, the capability that they need out there, it provides a very good tool for that. So I would ask them to keep that in mind.
Now that we've learned all about OTs, let's learn about you. So I believe that you've been at Syscom for about 20 years. Can you tell us about your career up until this point?
Been at Systems Command since 2004. Came back from working at Makatea over there. I've served in positions as a project officer. I've done an FMS case with Taiwan for AAVs. Been a team lead in the AAV team up there doing the starting of the C2 upgrade for the AAV program. Been a business manager in the ground transportation and engineer systems product group at the time. Was the product group director there subsequently after that. Been a PM for combat support systems, probably my most rewarding and beneficial tour I've had here at Systems Command.
Okay.
And since 2017, I've been working in the program management directorate here on the staff. And our focus here is providing program support to those supported PMs and PEOs and helping them be successful and understand the range of acquisition tools that we have in our tool bag today with the adaptive acquisition framework and things like other transaction agreements that are out there. So it's been a very, very rewarding 20 years. A lot I've learned over these 20 years, and a lot of worked with a lot of great people, which has been the biggest benefit of all that.
So your 20 years here at Syscom, has that all been as a civilian? Because you were, are still a Marine, always a Marine, but you were active duty at one point.
Yeah, 20 years has all been a civilian.
Okay.
Originally got at Marine Corps Systems Command, arrived at Marine Corps Systems Command in 1999 as a project officer. Served from 1999 to 2003, retired from the Marine Corps. Went to work at Makatea, and I was the operational test project officer there for the Lightweight 155 program. Was able to go through the Arctic event there and planning for the temperate climate event, and then was lucky enough to be hired back here in Systems Command and came back into PM AAVs at the time, working on the Taiwan FMS case where we sold some AAVs to Taiwan. So,
what was your MOS in the Marine Corps?
I was a 1310 engineer equipment officer in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
Yeah, retired as a Chief Warrant Officer 4. Been a wonderful adventure ever since then. So.
Did you go through San Diego or Parris Island?
I went through Parris Island. I was a Parris Island Marine, and originally came in my enlisted career, I was an artilleryman my first 8 years. There was some artillery community changes where they downsized.
Okay.
Thankfully, at the time, I didn't think it was a good move, but that was a great move. It required me to make a lateral move into the engineer equipment mechanic world. I did that for a few years, and then was lucky enough to be selected as a warrant officer, and again, progress up to be a Chief Warrant Officer 4 and retire as an engineer equipment officer.
So where are you from originally?
From Florida.
Okay.
Florida, just outside of Tampa, a little town called Oldsmore.
Oldsmore.
Yeah.
Okay. Where can we find you outside of work?
Outside of work, you can find me with my wife, Bobby, who just retired after 38 years of federal service, which I'm thankful for. She's been a big help my whole career, and I'm glad that she's able to now retire and enjoy that. So we enjoy outdoor activities. We enjoy rodeos and those type of things. So you can find us at those, and you can also find us at church. We attend Heritage Baptist Church up in Woodbridge, Virginia, and a lot of activities associated with that.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I heard your son is also in the Marine Corps.
No, son's a law enforcement professional.
They told me wrong.
Yeah, you got bum scoop, whoever that was. He is a Hillsborough County sheriff's deputy down in Hillsborough County, Florida.
Okay.
And he just recently got promoted to captain.
Congratulations.
Which is big. There's, I believe the number, and I don't know this exactly, but I believe it's like 11 to 14 captains in the patrol division that they have down there. He's been with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office for about 15 years. And again, just last September, promoted to captain. So working in the Special Investigations division down there. So,
do you think you'll ever move back to Florida?
No, I don't believe so. I
Okay.
think too much change. It's like any other place. It's not the same place I grew up. While I still have family there and we'll go back and visit often, we're likely not to make it back to Florida. If we have our druthers, we'll go to Northeast Texas and we'll retire there.
Texas isn't bad.
No, not
No
bad.
snow.
No snow.
Well, some parts of Texas get snow, but
Yeah, this northeast side still gets 3 of the 4 seasons. I would say it doesn't really get the really severe hard winter. The last time, or second from the last time we went down there to visit, they actually had snow.
Oh.
We went in January, had snow, and we got to a little airport in Shreveport, Louisiana, and our flight was held up because they were de-icing, and they only had one de-icing system for all the planes leaving out of there. So
that sounds about right.
They still get a little bit of weather over there.
Yeah. I'm from Mississippi, and so anytime we would get ice, or the whole city just shuts down. We don't know how to handle it there.
Yeah, growing up in Florida, didn't see a lot of snow. And,
No.
I believe it was either 1976 or 77. We got maybe a dusting of snow, and it shut down Tampa for the whole day. It had melted off by 10 o'clock, but that morning, everything shut down.
They're like, I don't know what to do.
That's right. We didn't know what to do. As kids, we made little snowballs, and when they started figuring out that it was melting off real quick, we made them and put them in the freezer to save them so we would have them for
I love that.
for later.
Yeah. Make a little snowman. Let's go on to the lightning round.
Oh, scary.
So I'm going to ask you a question, and then you just say the first thing that pops in your head. What's your favorite TV show, book, movie, or podcast?
I'll say favorite TV show is Doc Talk.
Doc Talk.
And it's a veterinarian doctor show.
Oh, I'm going to have to watch that.
Yeah, Doc Talk.
Favorite travel location?
Favorite travel location is the West. Any place from Western U.S. We love the Idaho. We've been out there a couple times, and we love the big scenery and the big mountains that are out there.
Are you a morning person or a night owl?
I'm a morning person.
And what did you want to be when you grew up?
I think when I first was a little kid, I wanted to be a fireman. I had an uncle who was a fireman, took me to the firehouse when I was a kid, and for some reason I wanted to be a fireman. That kind of morphed over the years, but fireman was the first thing.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for allowing me to get a little bit about other transactions and how they may be beneficial to our supported program management teams out there.
It was very educational. I appreciated it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Equipping the Core. Don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcasting platform or on social media. We'd love to hear from you.